Alright, I want you to take a listen to the following interview clip with Kurt Cobain, where he makes some observations about Madonna. And then I want you to stick around for a minute while I comment on those statements. And then I pose a couple of questions to you that I'd like to hear your opinion about. So first, let's hear Kurt Cobain talking about Madonna.
I respect Madonna for the things that she's introduced, because she's introduced some subversive things, and it has nothing to do with sex as far as I'm concerned. I'm talking about like the introduction to the Vogue dance, which originated in the gay clubs in the mid-'80s and early 80s and stuff like that. And she's always been supportive of things like that, which is, I think is really cool.
Right.
She's just from a different world, so I don't expect her to understand punk rock. Because, I mean, obviously she knew about punk rock. She had to. She was hanging out in New York at that time, and she chose to ignore it. So that was her choice.
Okay, so one of the things I'd like to talk about in regard to this statement is his observation about punk rock, where he said, well, hey, if Madonna chose to ignore punk rock, that's her choice. But that may be a mistake, given that this is where the culture is going. And what I want to talk about here isn't so much the musical aspect as the cultural aspect. And you may be saying, well, why bother talking about something that Kurt Cobain said about Madonna so long ago? Well, here's the reason. When he said, hey, I admire Madonna for being subversive, this is the key to why I'm doing the video. The idea that music can be subversive, that rock and roll has a subversive nature to it, which means basically challenging cultural assumptions. And for those of you out there, and there are quite a few of you, who think that music, particularly rock music, is basically dead right now, it has to do with this feeling that there's no more subversion, there's no more energy left. Even if there are bands out there that are doing the vintage sound, or even old rock stars doing new projects, there's no longer a feeling of rebellion to it. There's no longer a feeling like it's something that is a lightning bolt striking into the culture. And if you look around, there's not really too many things that are like that are in the popular consciousness right now. In other words, anything that is really subversive tends to be compartmentalized into a tiny little group. So there's niches where there's subversive culture going on. But in the larger picture, in the mainstream media, there's no longer a current of subversive culture. Not to speak of, it's all basically been commercialized. So this is why I wanted to do the video, is to point out that there is an aspect to rock music and even pop music that really goes beyond purely musical considerations. And so even if you have bands that are doing really good music, if they're not also challenging cultural assumptions the way that bands have in rock and roll from the earliest days, from Little Richard and Elvis and Gene Vincent, all the way through the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin, The Who, Black Sabbath, the Sex Pistols, and right on up through Metallica, all the way to the point where we are now, where it's getting harder and harder to name bands that are redefining things, that are tearing up the dictionary, so to speak. I think that there is a really good chance that this will come back into culture at some point, but it's questionable of whether or not what we call rock music will be part of it. Now, this is what I want to ask you. Do you feel that there is a potential for a resurgence of rock or heavy music that also carries a kind of cultural subversiveness to it, a rebellion to it? And I would put forward two thoughts on this. One, there are still areas where culture could be shocked or where assumptions could be challenged. And one of those areas is age. If you look at someone like Mick Jagger, who's out there at 80 whatever years old, still running up and down the stage like he's in his 30s or 40s, whether you think that's admirable or comical, it challenges assumptions about age. The same with Jimmy Page having such a young girlfriend with Scarlett. I think that there are other pop and rock stars at this point who are challenging age assumptions, and I think those assumptions should be challenged. I don't think that as a whole the culture has a healthy perspective on aging, so I think that looking at aging from a different perspective is probably a good thing. Number 2, I think that there are still challenges and cultural barriers toward individuality. I'll just leave it at that. As Kurt Cobain mentioned there, it doesn't really have to do with sex as much as it appears to. That's usually just an excuse to talk about individuality. What we're really talking about here is, do people have a right to live by their own standards, or do they have to accept standards that are given to them? And I think that rock music as a whole has always been part of challenging the idea that you have to live by someone else's standards. And I think that, you can take that too far as well, but I also think that it's an important thing to have as part of any culture. This is what I think, but what really matters is what you think. So if you have an idea about this or any other topic connected to classic or contemporary music, please drop it in the section below, and remember to like and subscribe. Also, check out the join button that's available now. If you become a channel member, you'll gain access to members-only badges, polls, videos, and other cool content you'll see when you click on the button. You can also help out the channel by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link, going to the Buy Me a Coffee site, and making a donation. Every little bit helps this channel stay strong. Thanks a lot.